though there have been services working with the adults, with the parents, who may have had issues to do with mental health or addictions or family violence or whatever, they obviously hadn't seen the really desperate need of the child at that point or known what to do. So that's why I've got that little canary there, you know, to remind us that children are often the canary in the coal mine. So they're the ones who are just going to drop off the perch. They're not going to be able to advocate for themselves. So it's really important for us to remember that it's not just about the statutory child protection services, even though they're important. It's actually a responsibility for all of us. But then, I guess, when I say it's all our responsibility, I'm not saying you need to do anything extra, because we're all overworked, aren't we? And underpaid, as that cartoon says. It's just about working in a slightly different way, and with an eye to a few different points and a few different strategies than maybe what we're used to. So at this point, I just want to let you know that we can actually help. So with the clipboards that are going to circulate around, it's a very high-tech way of doing it, I know, but we're going to host a series of monthly lunchbox sessions because we realise that what we're trying to unpack in this time, we're not going to be able to unpack in the way that we want to in 50 minutes if we actually start off with 35 until afternoon tea. So we're definitely not going to be able to get to the bottom of it in that time. So what we're wanting to do is, in the Launceston area, invite people around. If you can put your name and your email on the clipboard against the date that you think you might be most available, just let us know, and we can get back in touch with you if you're interested in having more conversations about this. Because a lot of the tools we're going to touch on, we're just going to be able to mention and then say, hey, we can unpack this in greater detail in the lunchbox sessions. So that's what we'll be meaning when we say that. It's just to give you a taste. So we've got 3 key strategies today. Belle's going to unpack maybe what talking to parents might be about, just different strategies there about their parenting practices. Katrina's going to unpack for us a little bit about identifying and responding to indicators of potential harm. And I'm going to come back at the end talking about a little bit about looking after ourselves when we're faced with really distressing situations in our work. Over to Belle.
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, everyone. Ooh, the microphone's on. So what I'm going to present to you today are 5 keys that can be used in collaborative practice with the parents. I want to stress that this isn't a silver bullet approach to working with parents, but they are just 5 potential strategies that you can use to create that collaborative practice. You'll probably notice embedded within these 5 practice principles are solutions-focused brief therapy, narrative therapy and appreciative inquiry. So I imagine a lot of you out there probably have come across those methodologies before. So we've got building a foundation of family engagement, envisioning a preferred direction in life, identifying constraining problems and their impacts, identifying preferred ways of being or alternate stories, and identifying community supports. So what does the evidence tell us about how to engage with families? Well, what we do know from the evidence that the best outcomes in child protection cases happen when there's a strong working relationship between both the helper and the worker. Now, the worker and the parent. This is not going to be rocket science for anybody out there. We know that the bedrock of actually good practice is this collaborative work. But I think what can tend to happen when we actually start getting into working with parents is very quickly moving into problem solving. We have expectations placed on us as workers, so we quickly can move into that place and forget about the collaborative work that we actually do need to be doing. So what I want you to do for just a moment is turn to the person next to you and see if you can come up with 3 different points about what you would actually be doing, what sort of things would you be saying, or what actions would you actually be taking if you were undertaking collaborative work. So if you just turn to the person next to you for a moment and have a chat. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pull you back again now, but I can't do that with... Okay. Because of our short time frame, I'm actually going to have to pull you back a lot quicker. I'm sorry, I can see that you're starting to get into it. Okay, so hopefully what you'll see within the points that you've raised with each other is some of the things that we'll cross now. So the first strategy we've got is building a firm foundation. So this is where we start to question, are you an expert or are you an ally with the parent? So an expert is coming again from that position where we as the worker are the ones who know everything and we are intent on fixing that family dysfunction, as opposed to being an ally with the parent who is intent on walking alongside the parent and helping them create possibility and hope in their life. So I guess this again comes back to looking at our own values that we have as workers. So we need to start to look at what are our own social and our cultural and economic positions that we've come from, and in what ways can these actually stand in the way of our collaborative work. These values in and of themselves aren't a problem, but they can be a problem when it means that our values start to form judgments around how we're perceiving them parents. We all know what it's like, well I certainly know what it's like to be around somebody who may be saying all the right sorts of things to you, but you can just tell that they're sitting in judgment of you. And that's no different from the parents that we work with. So I guess again it's about upping your empathy and being able to come back to that space and supporting them. And again, in that situation, because we all are mandated reporters, so being very clear with parents as well about what you can and cannot promise them and what you will and what they can expect. So some of the ways that we can start to build this firm foundation is to start to ask the parents, who are they outside the context of the problem? What are some of the things that they like to do? What are their values? What do they care about? I guess it's difficult to engage parents when we don't have that strong level of trust and that rapport there. So it's a good thing to remember the connection before correction. It's just not possible, I don't think, to even get down to those nitty-gritties of actually dealing with some of the problems when you don't have that strong level of connection and trust. So the first part we want to look at doing is creating a new direction. So this is where we start to help to create a vision of possibility with the parent. So for many of the parents that we work with, their lives can be so problem saturated that the thought of actually creating or having a different possibility is not something that they've even thought of. So for us as workers, we've become the facilitators of this hope and of this possibility. So essentially we are the ones to start to draw them at. And interestingly enough, a lot of the research also shows that as workers, that when we work from this position of creating a vision, it actually acts as a very strong motivator for us as workers as well, and stands against things like vicarious trauma, which Sharon will talk a little bit more about. So some of the questions that we can ask in creating a vision are, what kind of people do you hope your children will become? What is important about these qualities? What is it about these qualities that are important to you? If these qualities were to grow and grow in your life, what would you see happening? How would doing these things get you thinking about yourself as a parent? Now, after we've created a vision with the parent, we want to start to look at what's called externalising and mapping the effects of the problem. So this is where we start to make a distinction between the parent as the parent and the problem as the problem. So this in no way seeks to minimise the problem or the impacts of the problem. We want to explore thoroughly the way the particular problem might actually be impacting on the family and the children and how that's all playing out. But we start to get very clear about separating the parent from the problem. So for many parents and for many people in general, being able to separate the problem can be a really profound sense of self-determination in their life, so that they start to have more choices in their lives, and allows the families to be able to collaborate together against the problem. So some of the externalising questions are, how does the problem help you? Now, this is where you need to actually help find a name that actually fits for the parent. So instead of necessarily working with ascribed diagnostic labels, so for example, if someone's been diagnosed with depression, you may not actually work with that label, you would work with the parent around helping them find a label that's applicable for them. So for example, they may come up with the dark fog, and in that way it helps the parent to be able to access their own knowledge and their own expertise around how they would manage the dark fog as opposed to the clinical experiences. So how does the problem impact on your better judgment as a parent? What does it try and convince you about yourself? If it were making all of the decisions in your life, where would it take you? How does the effects of the problem measure against your vision for the future? Again, these externalising questions can always be brought back to the vision that you've started to create with the parent in the beginning, asking, is this moving towards your vision or does this move you away from your vision? I'm only briefly going to be able to touch on these, and in our lunchbox sessions we will unpack them and go into detail a lot more. So once we've externalised and mapped the effects of the problem, we want to start to look at preferred ways of being. So this is basically just relating to how is it that I want to be as a parent and what alternate stories do I have. So for example, for a parent who may be suffering from depression and finding it difficult to get out of bed and say feed their children and get their children off to school, we would start to be able to look at a time when perhaps they have been able to get out of bed or where they have actually been able to feed the children. So we'd really start to unpack that and ask questions about what's important about that action and how did they manage to do that and who stands in support of that. So really starting to build that preferred way of being. So some of the questions that come from preferred ways of being, which again is a narrative practice. How have you stopped the problem from getting bigger? When did you manage to take a stand against the problem? What do you think this says about you as a parent and what you care about? How does this way of being measure with your vision for the future? So once we've been able to connect them to preferred ways of being, you want to be able to start to link the parent into community support. So basically, people become people through the stories that they tell. So when people are starting to live out their preferred stories, we want to be able to connect them to people who can witness this. Now, for many of the parents that we work with, this can be quite low in their lives. They may not have many people who are witnessing these preferred realities. So you can actually get quite creative with how you might do that. So you might be trying to connect them to past grandparents, neighbours, friends, even potentially characters from movies. You can get quite creative with that process. So some of the questions that we can ask if there was a Grandma Mary. If Grandma Mary was sitting here and she could see how hard you're trying to reclaim your life from depression, what do you think she would say? Who would be least surprised to hear how important it is to you to care for your kids by getting out of bed? Who taught you about this skill, this value, this commitment of caring and making a difference? So as you can see, a lot of the work that we do with parents, we need to be able to have that strong level of trust and rapport in order to be able to even start to develop and deal with some of these alternate ways of being. Now, when the levels of trust start to get quite high and when we're working with parents, we do start to find, I think, that the information that we get is quite detailed, so we can start to see how the problems are actually impacting on their lives and how this might actually be impacting on the children. So it's important in that matter then to be quite mindful of the indicators of harm, which is what Katrina is going to talk to you about now. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh. Okay. So at the beginning, of your involvement with the family, it's important to gather a comprehensive and detailed picture of the family, its history and current circumstances, and the impacts of those circumstances on the safety and well-being of children. We want to be collecting information around both the strengths and the needs. In doing so, practitioners will be able to build a contextual understanding of the family that promotes respectful and empathetic practice and avoids responding in a compartmentalised manner. Comprehensive assessment of the whole family is central to successful intervention and support. As the case progresses, existing information will need to be updated and new information sought and incorporated into the intervention plan. Research has shown that systemic failures occur not because the information was not known about the dangerous indicators of fatal abuse and neglect, but rather agencies and professionals did not share the information or communicate adequately about the significance of the details or jointly plan a coordinated response. Collaboration and communication across child-focused services is vital to enable improved understanding, assessment and response to parental issues. Adult services need to be able to view the situation through the lens of the developing child, and child services need to have a comprehensive understanding of the parental difficulties to understand how these affect parents' own well-being, their parenting capacities and their children. I'm going to show a video clip now which provides a bit of an example as to why it is so important that we collect a holistic, take a holistic view and make a holistic assessment considering the whole family in a way that isn't compartmentalised. This clip has been linked to us by the Australian Centre for Child Protection, and as I'm playing it, I want you to be thinking about how would you respond.
Okay, I can go myself. Sure. All right, then. Be careful.
Sorry we're late. That's okay. Okay, we're just finding. Okay. All right. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Kevin.
Where's your mum?
Home.
Did you bring lunch?
Forgot.
Forgot? All right, doesn't matter. We've got lots of fun things to do today. Sweetie, could you put me down a bit? Yeah, that's right.
Van, watch those scissors, please. Can they now please go to the bathroom?
Yes.
I don't want to play with Annie anymore.
Why?
She smells.
Alright, you go take a seat. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Kids, do something for the baby. Hey, those colours look great. Here, I'll watch those clips, please.
Annie. She's still there. I thought Brian was picking her up. Okay, we'll come right away.
Okay. Can I have a show of hands? How many of you work primarily with children? Thanks. How many primarily with adults? And how many work with both? Great. Thanks. So when working with families like Annie and Rosie's, when we're trying to identify the need, we need to be thinking about what the whole family needs. What do the children need? What do the parents need? We need to be thinking about, in our services, how can we be talking about parenting needs and the needs of children? If we think about the video clip, what does Annie need? What does Rosie, the mother, need? What does the father need in relation to parenting? And not rocket science, but of course we need to prioritise the intervention. We need to be looking at what the basic needs are. In order to be able to support people, we need to address their needs in a systemic way that concentrates on meeting basic needs before progressing to the next level. It's not much use focusing on parenting skills for a single mother who's struggling to feed and house her children. We need to be working from a family-centred, strengths-based approach rather than problem-saturated. The term risk is something that is regularly used when discussing families with multiple complex needs. However, it's important that deficits, problems and difficulties do not define the families, as Bel was referring to earlier. Some important practice tips for working with families with multiple and complex needs. And this is not rocket science, but just some points that we could remind ourselves of. Do not underestimate the value of addressing immediate material and or practical needs for families under stress. Attend to sources of non-professional support that may be helpful to the family. Engage and involve trusted community members who know the family well and are prepared to support and or advocate for the family. Help family members to make sense of their current difficulties by assisting them to create and understand the context surrounding the family issues. Help family members connect their current circumstances with past experiences. This helps to reduce the stigma, pathologising and individual blame, and it can be really useful, a useful vehicle for hope and change. There are a whole range of different scenarios and family complexities that we work with where we need to identify and respond to indicators of potential harm. Today we don't have a whole lot of time to go in depth with this, so we'll briefly unpack the Annie and Rosie clip. But this is something that we will cover in more depth when we have the lunchbox sessions. So when responding, we need to clearly explain our role and purpose and plan with the family. Identify the issues of concern and we hear a lot of talk around the need of working in a strength-based approach, and this can be really difficult when we are all mandatory reporters, and there are often times that we do need to report. The strength-based approach is transparent and doesn't avoid difficult conversations about discrepancies in family members' accounts of events. It is informed about child abuse and offending behaviour and is not naive about the dangerous circumstances some children experience. Working from a strength-based approach includes working in collaboration with other agencies when needed and where possible. And we are getting better at working in a collaborative way, but this is something that we all need to have a look at, how we might be able to improve it. Family group meetings, professionals, meeting and care teams are really good strength-based approaches. I can't talk too much about those right now as we don't have time, but again, they will be covered in more depth in lunchbox sessions. Often when we're working with families, we're not clear about where to refer to or what programs are available in our communities. Something that the advanced skills workers, Bel, Sharon and I can work with or can help you with is linking you to relevant services. If we're not aware of what's out there, we can do the research and find out for you. So in Annie and Rosie's situation, there is obviously some long-term and short-term issues. If you were working with Annie and Rosie, how would you respond? What are the risks that you've been able to identify? Can we just call out some of those risks? We can't have any long, in-depth discussions around this as we'd like to, but maybe if we could just call out what some of the issues that you've identified are. Anyone?
Safety.
Safety? Yep.
Nutrition. Nutrition.
Yep. Sorry, it's hard to hear you from up the back. So Rosie's mental health, got Annie's safety, taking herself off to childcare, not having lunch, taking the lunch from another child's bag, not being collected on time, the hygiene issue, soiling the pants, the social impact that kind of creates. Okay. So many of us work in silos, but as mentioned before, to better be able to support the families that we work with, we need to be finding ways that we can work in collaborative practice and work in a more holistic way. So looking at the whole family. Consider the informal and formal networks of support. Be clear about what you mean by support. Obviously, not rocket science, but really important to review the outcomes and reflect on our own practice. Assessing and monitoring progress should take place informally on an ongoing basis, as well as formally as a part of a regular review. Meetings where the family progress is reviewed and monitored in accordance with action, support plans, in collaboration with the family, of course. Regular review is a critical feature of effective support and intervention. Some of the critical questions to ask at this point might be, has the goal been met? What is the evidence of the goal being met? What are the outcomes from the family's point of view? What are the outcomes from the workers' agency's points of view? There's a whole lot of questions, obviously, that can be asked there, but I haven't got time to go through them right now. When problems seem intractable, practitioners themselves may feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of the most appropriate intervention. Practitioners and managers need to access appropriate supervision. It supports them and contributes to improved skills in practice, and it may also influence the development of practice culture in an organisation, promoting quality practice and improved outcomes for children and their families. It's also in that supervision context that a practitioner is able to reflect on the personal impacts of working with vulnerable children and families and obtain professional and organisational support in self-care. When working with complex families, day in, day out, workers can be at risk of vicarious trauma. Sharon will now talk to you about vicarious trauma and the impact on self.
Oh dear. And you're at 3:20. Are we all happy to have 5 minutes? This was meant to be like a 15-minute thing, but I can wrap it all up in 5, if that's all right. Okay, I'll go for it. Now look, talking about what vicarious trauma is, it's really a cumulative transformative effect on the helper. And they're the two main points. They're cumulative and transformative in that it sneaks up on you, layer upon layer, and it's transformative. So it can have huge areas of psychological impact. And I won't go through them, you can read them, the personal ones, the relational ones, and the worldview. But overall, what it means is that you end up seeing the world through a different lens. It's a very unsafe world compared to the one that you thought you were in. All of those things can lead to fear and alienation and substance abuse and so on. So it's a slippery slope for people that don't recognise that this is a real risk area for all of us. That's my next slide. Now you know about trauma's impact on the body, the fight, flight, freeze response. There's also a good, commensurate response for the mind. Stress hormones released when you are in that overwhelmed state. I like to call that the headless chook syndrome. It happens to me when I lose my keys on the way to the airport and I can't think where I last saw them because my brain is just not working. So it's not how you want to be at the end of the day. Now, empathy, and I know you're all lovely empathic people, which is why you're working in this area, but empathy actually increases the impact of another's trauma on us. So you can choose to have empathy, which I call conscious empathy, but much more insidious and dangerous is the unconscious empathy that we give. They've discovered neurons in the brain known as mirror neurons, which actually copy the activity of others around us. So if you spend a lot of time with those who had a lot of stress or trauma, you will start to be impacted by it. You actually can't help it. And it's unconscious. If you're not aware, you have no way of filtering what's coming into you. So again, most at risk, if you've got a personal experience, particularly of the trauma that you're dealing with, that's really, really dangerous because that's primary trauma as well as the secondary or vicarious trauma. If you're unaware of your body sensations, that again is a huge risk because your body sensations will often give you the first hint that there's something going on. Dealing with traumatised children, I know a lot of you would, is another huge thing. So I want to encourage you to take this test. Obviously we're not going to do it now. It'll take about half an hour for you in your own time. But if you go to that website there, the ProQual website, you'll be able to download the test and assess your own level of compassion satisfaction, so the benefits that come to you from being a helper, as opposed to compassion fatigue. And the way that they structure it, and researchers look at it all differently, these guys look at compassion fatigue being made up of burnout and secondary trauma, and it's well documented, they say that layers and layers of secondary trauma become vicarious trauma. So that's how it all fits into the overall picture. If you were to map the results, you might see that you, and this is just a theoretical you, obviously. If you have an area of primary trauma in your life, let's say your family of origin, there might have been some family violence or something, that's a certain amount of primary trauma shown by the size of that circle. You may end up with a fairly high score on the secondary trauma, which is other people's maybe experience of family violence, and that can become vicarious trauma over time. And then you may actually have a small burnout score, for instance, because that's quite a separate area. So you might find it really interesting to look at your results. But please remember, this is just a snapshot. So it's just taking your temperature, really. It's not set in stone. If you have any concerns, please see a mental or physical health professional about it, because it's not meant to be, it's just meant to be a tool to help you get an idea of where you might be sitting at this moment. So strategies to manage this type of trauma. Of course, we'll be going into this in much more detail in the lunchbox sessions. Can I see where the folders are now? Are they actually, have they gone around the whole room? Or are they, yeah, has anyone not seen a folder? Has it come over this side? Yep, so it's just up the back, is it? Would you mind popping that up the back to Katie? We'll be able to go into much more detail in the lunchbox sessions, but body awareness is key, and this is where mindfulness practice and meditation is really, really important. But knowing your own warning signs, because your body will give you some huge hints, you'll be able to intervene early and decrease the impact of other people's trauma on you. When you learn what's normal for you under normal circumstances or under moderate stress, then you'll also be able to tell when you're heading into a danger zone and how you can then put the brakes on and apply strategies that bring you back out of that headless chook sort of area, back into a calm and clear space. And the last thing I wanted to leave you with is the personal safety plan. This is an example of my own safety plan. We in Anglicare, Children, Family and Community Stream, we've decided to implement what's called a sanctuary model because we recognise the danger of vicarious trauma on the work that we do. the danger to ourselves and the danger to our clients if it's not checked. So we've actually implemented this for all workers, so for staff and for managers. Everyone has a personal safety plan, which is basically, it's a really simple thing to do, just making up a list of really simple activities that can help you when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, something that can just help you stop and come back into a much lower activation. So for me, I just need to stop, because I get into a flap. I just need to stop talking, stop doing, stop everything, and breathe, go make a cuppa or have a little walk around the corridor or something, and ask for help, because often, that's something I find pretty hard to do, and it helps me a lot. So speaking of help, don't you like that segue? We can support anyone who's working with parents with children 0 to 12 through, we do case support, which is confidential. We can help with referrals, as Katrina was saying, provide free training. But I really want to emphasise the lunchbox sessions, because we haven't really been able to do any of this justice by sort of whipping through it as quickly as we have. So there we have it. Thank you very much.